Everybody up and live. This is the 502 live streamers continuing Mayoral Candidate series of interviews, and today's guest, Tim Findley Jr. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you all.
Grateful that you're here.
Consider you all friends.
Well, and thank you for letting us use this beautiful sanctuary of yours. It says Restoring the Foundation.
Yes.
Kingdom Fellowship. Why don't you just talk to us a little bit about being Tim Findley?
Oh, wow. Born and raised here in Louisville. Family here. Was born and raised in Newburgh. Graduated from Moore High School. Went away to Eastern Kentucky University. Went through the young adult find yourself phase. Ended up coming back. Worked various jobs and really found my calling in ministry. Ended up as a minister at Canaan Christian Church on Heights Lane. Went to seminary, started Kingdom Fellowship in 2008, and here we are. So that's a little bit about me. And I have a wonderful, beautiful 20-year-old daughter, Kendall Findley, who is now working at Drake's on Hirschborn Lane. So I go in there and get Juicy Lucy cheeseburgers as much as possible.
I have to go check one of those out.
Yeah, they're good. They're good.
And as a working dad, I can imagine, having a daughter and a job and a pastorship, undertaking a mayoral campaign has been, I'm sure, something that you really have had to put a tremendous amount of time and attention into.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but to be completely honest, when it comes to leadership, it's about your team. And I am very blessed to have an amazing team, both on the ministry side, the nonprofit side, and now the campaign side. And I pretty much, I meet with them. They make sure that I look great and say the right things on things like this. And I'm blessed. And I think it's important because without a great team, you couldn't do this. So. Absolutely.
Well, if you want to start, Tim, your mayoral platform is pretty well laid out on your Findley for Mayor website, which is great because people just click right through there and see how you feel about every single issue. And a couple of the ones that just popped up for me, and obviously you know that we were going to ask you this, is how do you address rising crime while transforming policing?
Well, first let me say this. That website, very proud of it. Those issues that are on there are sort of at a mile-high view. There's not a lot of specifics, not a lot of details. The specifics, the details, the policy, how I plan to get it done, I'm going to be releasing that next month, where I want people to be very, very clear on not just what I'm saying. I don't want to speak sort of philosophical. I want to speak very practically, so I plan on doing that. But in terms of your question, public safety, gun violence, policing, that's what's on everybody's mind here in Louisville. I always say this, and I've been saying this more and more. When people ask me, how are you going to address the violence in the city? How are you going to deal with the policing issue, transforming policing? Well, there's two ways that I'm looking at this. Number one, we're not going to fix a problem that took decades and decades and decades to get to this point. I think I don't want people to fall victim to candidates giving you Band-Aids for broken bones. That's an issue. When it comes to transforming policing, number one, we have to have better leadership within our police department. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this yet, but it's me. Day one, we have to have a new police chief. I don't know Chief Erica Shields personally. I don't have anything against her. I think the process that brought her here was flawed in many different ways. She was put in a situation, coming from a situation that was already unfortunate, terrible, really, not unfortunate, terrible. And our city needs different leadership. So that's number one. We need better trained officers. And our officers need to know that the culture of policing has to reflect the ideals of the mayor and those in my administration. I think that culture shift, That's a part of what I'm talking about when I say transformation. And that training piece is so extremely important. We need to have officers that are culturally competent. We need to have officers who understand what people are dealing with in underserved and marginalized communities. And when you talk about rising gun violence, again, most candidates are going to jump on here and they're going to talk about illegal guns on the street. We know that that's a problem. They're going to talk about a lot of different things. I want people to hear this from me, that if you're going to fix a lot of what we're seeing right now, first we have to acknowledge this, that we have an investment and divestment issue in Louisville. We've had it for a very long time. I'm a part of an incubator at the University of Louisville, and I'm reading a book by George C. Wright called Life Behind the Veil. And he talks about issues that have plagued underserved communities in Louisville, specifically black communities, from like 1865 all the way up to, I think, the 1960s, something like that. And a lot of the issues that we're talking about today in terms of investment and divestment have been going on since the 1800s. What I believe has to happen is that we have to acknowledge where we have divested in these communities, and then we have to invest. And I'm not talking about just a line item here and there, that there has to be a completely equitable budget, that we are pumping resources into our communities, because where we're seeing the lack is that our kids are starved of programs, starved of community centers, starved of music and arts programs. And I know people may say, well, Pastor Tim, that doesn't fix the violence issue. I would argue, yes, it does. A lot of what we're seeing today are individuals, our children, who are the products of a divestment that happened in Louisville with this current Metro Council, when they cut funding, when they defunded. And I know we don't like to hear defunding with police, but they defunded. And I was at the Metro Council meeting last week when they admitted that it was a mistake, that they defunded the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. And that office has operated on a shoestring budget for years. Now, they realize it was a mistake, and they're working to fully fund that office. Well, what we're seeing is the consequence of what happens when you defund children. So first week, first month, immediately is going to be to put together an equitable budget for our city, and that equitable budget, that resources that we have are going to be pumped into youth services, neighborhoods, and making sure that we are ensuring the future for our children. And that's how you that's how you deal with the violence. And of course, there are other things that will need to be done, but just stay tuned, because I'm going to lay all of that out in November.
So, Tim, you know that we have a serious homeless problem here in the
Yes.
city of Louisville. And I would like to know what would be your plans to help solve that?
Again, it's resources, it's investment. We have a person that I believe is just brilliant as it relates, and is passionate, Ja'Cory Arthur. When you talk about the houselessness crisis in our city, there are so many different things that have connected and caused this issue to blow up. I think we have to deal with affordable housing. We have to deal with wraparound services that are pushing people into houselessness. We have to develop a strategy to deal with these vacant and abandoned properties that are all over the city. We should not have the kind of houselessness issue that we have, and yet we have all of these structures where nobody seems to understand that if we pump the money there. But let me also say this, because I think we have another issue in Louisville. It's not just about affordable housing. It's not just about wraparound services. It's not just about mental health services to help those who may be on the street that have become so accustomed and acclimated to living under certain conditions. We got to have mental health services. But another issue that we have in Louisville, and we don't necessarily like to talk about it a lot, is that Louisville is the fourth most segregated city in America. the fourth most segregated city in America, I think according to 2018, 2019 study. And the reason why that's a problem is because when you say the West End, you automatically think black. When you say St. Matthews, you automatically think white. Because when you grow up in Louisville, you can name certain parts of the city, and you generally will attach races to that particular area. That's a problem. The reason why I think we have to tackle that, and one of the issues as it relates to our segregation issue, is that we don't just need affordable housing, we need mixed income housing. That people should be able to live in any part of this city that they choose. And we've got to deal with the fact that there are too many people, too many politicians, elected officials who are trying to keep people out. I remember leading a protest in Norton Commons. And it was my first time really being in Norton Commons on the ground, walking around, doing all that good stuff. And I remember looking around thinking, oh my goodness, this is like its own city. I mean, it's got its own grocery store, its own restaurants, its own department store, its own hospital, its own YMCA, all these different things. And I'm not saying that Norton Commons is to blame, but what I am saying is there's got to be political push. There's got to be political strategy behind making sure that we're not simply regulating people to certain parts of the city that correspond with their race. We need mixed income housing. We've got to have affordable housing. And then another part that I want to make sure that I'm championing is the universal pre-K. I think that when you talk about families, mothers, single mothers who have 2 and 3 kids, who are looking for opportunities to either get back to work or looking to build wealth, it's very hard to do that when you can't find affordable and quality childcare. We have right now, right this very moment in this church, downstairs, we have a pre-K right now full of 3 to 5 year olds right now. As a matter of fact, in about 10 minutes, you're going to probably hear them in the background. And we have a person, Coleman Preparatory Academy. She's brilliant. It's her school. We need to make sure that we are giving her the resources to succeed because, again, it helps our economy. It helps us to deal with allowing our Louisvillians to build wealth and to see the quality of life for everybody to grow. So that in a nutshell, it's not just a one road issue. It's several things that we have to do if we're going to see our city become the city that I believe it can be.
So historically, at least for the last couple of decades, public transit in Louisville has been kind of lacking. Mm-hmm. In particular, in some of the more impoverished areas of town, like the West End.
Right.
So for those neighborhoods that do happen to have, a lot of people that don't have access to their own vehicles and need that public transit, like what options do you know of that you're going to try to move forward with to offer, better public transit for, in particular, the youth and the elderly?
Yes. I'm very glad you asked that
And
the disabled.
Absolutely.
Because of one of the areas that I am very adamant about, and other cities are in the midst of pilot programs, and I believe Louisville should be one of those cities. I believe that public transportation can be and should be free. Should be free. I believe that we have the dollars to do it. When you look at the budget that has been proposed, and you look at the budget really for years and years, the money is there to do that. I also think that we have to have a better strategy. TARC should be running earlier, and it should be running later. TARC 3, the same thing. That we've got to make sure that our kids, that the elderly, that the disabled are not having to walk 5, 6, 7 blocks to catch a bus and then get there 3 hours earlier, catch 4 buses to get to a part of town, and then do the same thing where they get off work at 6 o'clock and they're not getting home till 9. That's a problem. I want to completely redo the infrastructure, the strategy with TARC. I believe it should be free. It should run earlier. It should run later. And I believe that this can be done. And I would like to, while we can't probably come out and just do that immediately, look at particular areas in the city that would benefit first and start that program there, and then see about branching out throughout the rest of the city.
There's several parts of the city that originally used to have like neighborhood like trolley lines.
Yeah.
So that you could catch a trolley to go to the corner store instead of having to walk 6 blocks.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you and your cabinet have kind of looked into?
Absolutely. Not only that, I'll tell you this. I believe that that Louisville is a city for its size, to where we should have a rail system. We should have that here. I think that we need fresh, innovative leadership for these things to happen. I am not saying that there won't be challenges and there won't be, obstacles along the way, but I'm committed to our city becoming way more innovative, greener, cleaner, and making sure that people in underserved communities are able to get to where they need to get to, and do so without shame or embarrassment. And that's very, very important to me. I believe, and I thought about doing this a while back, but really getting on TARC and just starting to survey the conditions of TARC, seeing what it looks like. Because if you want more people to believe in and use your public transportation, it's got to have the kind of presentation that gives people pride, and people, they feel good about being on your public transportation system. And that can happen, so.
Wonderful. You've talked a lot about the Green New Deal for Louisville, Tim, and that's an AOC statement. So we'll just give her credit where credit is due for coming up with the idea. But yours particularly impacts the health of the residents in the area of town that you described just a moment ago, the West End, as being primarily thought of as black. Well, it does have a huge impact on black because of the way the rubber town is situated, the toxicity of all of the things there. So talk to us a little bit about what you would do to improve our little bowl of allergy here in the Ohio Valley.
Well,
environmentally.
We have made some strides, just to be completely honest and fair. There have been strides made as it relates to our city being a cleaner city, but we still have a ways to go. I tell people all the time, you don't want to plant and grow anything in the West End. The soil is toxic. The air is polluted. These are things that have persisted for years, and they are not like that on accident. Redlining has as much to do with what we're seeing now. When you talk about cancer rates, when you talk about asthma issues, all these different things, these were done on purpose. So a part of what I am proposing and what I want to do is look at, again, when these businesses are being built, when they're going up, what kind of green plan is being mandated that they take? What kind of, when houses are being built, what kind of environmental policy is in place to make sure that families, that businesses that are coming into these communities, that will be coming into these communities, are abiding by this sort of clean new ideal, making sure that people are not being subjected to further toxic elements. I think that there are so many different things, and that's a part of what I'm going to be releasing in November, is because I believe as a mayor, you have to lead the charge as it relates to your city's environmental plan. And I believe that starts with new houses that are being built, that starts with contractors and how they are developing not only their plans, but what they're building, how they're building it. Are we taking advantage of solar power? I was reading just the other day that if more people put air in their tires, that would actually help the environment. Just air in tires. Those are the kind of things that if we're going to, and as a pastor and as one that I 100% believe that it is our responsibility to take care of this planet. I believe that as mayor, I want to be the very first person, the person that has the bully pulpit saying that this is our responsibility, from the West End to the East End to the South End, wherever. All of us have to move in a much greater way to make sure that our city is clean for everybody. But as it relates to the West End, if we're going to see an equitable city, it means that there has to be more attention to the toxicity of the West End. And I'll be the person to do that.
So we acknowledge that we definitely have segregation here in our city. And we also, a lot of citizens in the city feels like there's two governments in the city. So as you being the mayor of our city, if you become the mayor of our city, what will you do?
I like you claimed it for me already. I appreciate
that. What will you do to make it more of one, just one Louisville instead of everybody? We kind of touched on the housing aspect of segregation, but as far as government-wise, what are we going to do to bring us all back together?
Well, I'll tell you this much. In the history of Louisville, there's never been a black mayor. Day one, I'm sending a message that it's a new day. I will be the mayor for everyone, no question. But I think people need to embrace that you can be a mayor for everyone and still pull up the marginalized, still have an equitable plan for those who have been left out, who have been disenfranchised. Day one, I will have the most diverse administration this city has ever seen. That is a guarantee. That it will be more community involvement than this city has ever allowed. There will be more stakeholders from the community that are taking part in the building of the budget, of different things that we want to see happen in the city. That's going to be immediately. So I think that's where you start. People need to see people in positions of power that look like them. I think about this. I just received an email from my brother, from a coworker of his, and it was her daughter, who were fifth graders, who decided, for whatever reason, they said, "Hey, you're our guy," and they've decided that they want to be a part of the campaign team. They're making posters and things of that nature. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I think about that age group. I think about young people who can see their first African-American mayor, can see their first mayor of color and say, you know what? We can live in a better city. We can live, I think about so many kids. One of the things that I want to make sure I do is go to every single school, everyone I can, once I become mayor, and I do this already, but stand in front of them and let them see what you can become. That's how we bring each other together, that everyone can see that, you can achieve what you put your mind to.
While you're talking about kids, Tim, you've talked about raising teacher salaries, particularly in the higher risk areas, the more challenging areas to teach. What can you do to increase the facilities, the physical buildings that kids are going to school in, to increase their habitability, to increase their cleanliness, their environmental friendliness? Give those kids who go to those schools a sense of pride, like the kids who go to the newer schools actually have achieved.
Well, I want to first say this. Everyone needs to go to the Courier-Journal and read the article on the magnet schools.
Just did.
It is absolutely heartbreaking, but it's a phenomenally written expose on what's going on. As a matter of fact, Mandy, in this investigation, she talks about how the magnet schools and the haves and the have-nots have literally pushed the wealth and racial gap further apart in Louisville. So when you talk about those school facilities, when you talk about the conditions in which our kids are dealing, depending on where you live and what school you go to, while JCPS, again, is a separate entity, there has to be, again, political power that is in position to work with JCPS and really bring a level of accountability. And I have faith in many of our school board members. But again, there has to be accountability from the city's perspective that is laid upon JCPS to deal with the inequities as it relates to facilities. There is no reason why you should have a manual, and I have nothing against Manual High School, but there's no reason why you should have a manual that is poaching other schools like an Iroquois, and the Iroquois is there dealing with facility issues, or the fact that after 40, 50 years, we're celebrating that the third floor of Shawnee High School is no longer condemned. That's great, wonderful, but there's no reason why I should have stayed in that condition for that long. Those are the kinds of things that I want to speak loudly about. I want to bring a level of pushback to, and I want to make sure that people understand that the mayor is fighting every day, tooth and nail, to make sure that those inequities do not persist.
You got another question before we go? We got 4 minutes left.
So there's currently proposed legislation that is supposed to make 9 of the West End neighborhoods into a tax increment funded area. There is a partnership that is going to be taking taxes, privatized or public taxes, and putting it into a private fund that's supposed to reinvest into the West End. How much do you know about that, and what are your thoughts?
I was just on the TIF call. As a matter of fact, I spoke at the Breonna Taylor Symposium at the University of Kentucky this past weekend. On my way there, I was on the Zoom. I'm gonna say this, and again, my team is probably somewhere like, oh God. I'm not the TIF as it's laid out on paper looks really good. The problem is nowhere in the country has a TIF not led to gentrification or displacement. That's the better word. Nowhere has it happened. Secondly, I would say people need to research where this TIF came from, who was behind it, and the fact that the goal was to make the entire West End a TIF. All I'm saying is research who's behind it. I am not a supporter right now. One of the things that stuck out to me, and we're all still learning. Here's the thing that I want people to understand. I don't feel bad about not knowing a lot about the TIF. You know why? Because on the Zoom, I found out that the board members don't know a lot about the TIF. It's very, very murky. The community was there in force, wanting their voice to be heard. I've never seen where halfway through the meeting they decide, oh yeah, we want to hear from you. There's a lot left to be desired, and as it stands right now, as I've seen it and as I'm seeing it, I'm not a supporter.
And coincidentally, 2 board members have already resigned.
Absolutely.
I should tell you something.
Okay, and the last thought that I have is, we're talking about, Section 8, which is such a horrible phrase to use, affordable housing. How do we incentivize landlords, Tim, to make their property available? Because right now, we know that there aren't enough inspectors to inspect the land. Mm-hmm. People want to charge triple the rates so that they don't have to have Section 8 housing. How do we incentivize landlords to provide affordable housing, which will not only help, the homeless situation in our city, but also the underserved population that can't get out of renting and can't build generational wealth because they just can't even start to think about stability in housing. And sometimes being in an affordable housing situation and learning how to live in an apartment, pay your bills, etc., is a big step in the right direction.
Well, I will say this, that affordable housing, we always think about coming in day one purchasing. Affordable housing also is affordable rental with a path to ownership. And that's what has to be pushed. There has to be accountability. I believe in incentivizing, yes, but I also think that we have a lot of out-of-town slumlords in Louisville. There's a reason why 70% of the West End rents. And when you walk around and try to find out who owns these vacant houses, it's people out of California, people out of New York, and they don't care about the condition of the home. I was just talking to a gentleman who is a part of the affordable housing push, and he was sharing with me that you have so many landlords from out of town who are essentially holding properties for ransom. So before I start talking about incentivizing, I would say we need to start holding those who own these homes accountable. And I want to see more people who live in Louisville with the deeds to homes. I want to see more people who live in Louisville who are not put in position to come into these dilapidated structures and feel like they have nowhere else to go. I want to come in and tear down some stuff first. And those slumlords, and I'm not to the point yet to where I'm talking about incentivizing them. They need to be ran out of the city. So, and that's another where they're like, probably like, yo.
Any final thought you want to share with us before we end? We allotted 30 minutes and we started just a couple of minutes after 4, so.
Yeah, no, first of all, let me say thank you all, 502 live streamers. You all are amazing. I count you all as friends, and I appreciate the work that you all do. I would say this, I was really encouraged just a couple of days ago by a poll that WDRB did, where they asked that if the mayoral race was next week, who would you vote for? And again, it's very, very early. These things have a tendency to change, but I was very encouraged that you had Mr. Nicholson, who came in somewhere around 31%, 32%. You had Bill Dourif, who's the mayor of J-Town, who coincidentally in 2020 gave me a key to the city. So just wanted to throw that in there. He came in around 30%, and I came in at 22%. That sends a message to people in the city that I don't have I'm not going to have the funds that these other folks are going to have. We are truly a grassroots campaign, but I need your help. We're doing some phenomenal things. We just opened up our campaign headquarters. So if you're watching this and you believe in this campaign, simply go to Findley, Findley, the number 4 mayor.com, findleyformayor.com, and stay tuned. November, I'm going to be talking about everything I talked about today, but I'm going to tell you how we're going to get it done. I'm going to give you the business plan. I'm going to show you how we're going to transform policing, how universal pre-K is so necessary in our city, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen. So stay tuned, and I appreciate you all for being a part of this stream.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you guys.
How was that? Cool?
I think it was really good.
Yeah.